You're listening to The Women in the Arena. I'm your host, Paige Rene, former collegiate athlete turned leadership entrepreneur for women just like you. Each week, I'm bringing you a new person or message to help you expand and elevate into the woman you know you're meant to be. Now, let's step into the arena. Hey, you guys, we are back inside the arena with the one and only Carol Chumney. She's the author of The Arena, One Woman's Story about her experience in the political climate. She is a current circuit court judge. She's been in state legislature. She's been a trial attorney and a city councilwoman. And she came within 7 points of being the first woman mayor of Memphis. So I'm so excited to talk to you. Thank you for being here, Carol.
Glad to be on the show.
So tell us, were you always interested in politics? Where did this come from? Where did this career trajectory get its start?
Well, yes, I always was. As a little girl, I was always fascinated with politics. I always wanted to be in politics. I call it public service. And I always ran for office, student government, as soon as I could. Sometimes I won, sometimes I lost, but I never quit.
That's really cool. What drove you to be in those positions? Was it more of having a strong opinion about how things should be done? Was it wanting to make a change? Like, what was it that drove you?
I think I was wanting to make a difference and really believing in the power of our democracy or democratic form of government to be able to make a difference. My parents, as I say in the book, inspired me. My father was a college history professor. My mother always wanted to be in politics, but she grew up at a time where women could not do that. And so we always talked about current issues around the dinner table. And I think that's part of what inspired me was just the fact that we talked about things when I was growing up, issues and things that were in the news.
So your mom must have had some challenges. We're going to get into a little bit of the gender bias and the glass ceiling and things that you've had to move through and navigate. Did your mom share any of that early on?
Yeah, my mother, it's an interesting story. She did go to college. She didn't finish, but because she got married to my dad, and she did try to go back later and almost finished. I think Spanish got her, Spanish classes. But she did say that her father was just shocked when she went to college because even though she worked with him in his business quite a bit, just learning and everything. Back then, a lot of women didn't go to college. And not only did she go to college, but she ended up being the homecoming queen for the University of Memphis on top of it. So she had a lot of go get 'em, and she still does. In fact, I'm blessed that she's 86 and my dad is 88 and they're still here.
That is so amazing. Okay, we are going to get into the book and explore a lot of that, but I'm just dying to pick your brain more. So when do you feel like you came up against resistance in your political career when it came to being female?
It was a shock to me, and I do write about it in the book, and the reason is my parents never led me to believe I couldn't achieve anything I really wanted to achieve. And what I say in the book is they taught me if you work hard and play by the rules, you can succeed. And so I always worked hard, and I played by the rules sometimes, but then sometimes I didn't like the rules, so I tried to make new rules, one of which was letting women do things. And I think the first time that it really hit me was when I tried to move up in higher office, because when I was in law school, and I think that's one thing that always just made me keep fighting about it was, because in law school and college, a lot of times we had anonymous grading, especially in law school. So I always made top grades. So I knew that I was smart enough to do the job. So I did get elected to the legislature at the age of 29, my first race. But then when I wanted to move up, that's when the challenges began.
And were they challenges that you heard within the office, with the constituents? Like, where exactly were you getting maybe pushback?
I focus more on the book. A lot of it is the press and the media because they help shape public opinion. And so what I noticed is when I was running maybe for reelection to the state house, where I had a really good record and had accomplished a lot, that they would write about me like I was the best thing since sliced bread. But when I started running for mayor, all of a sudden my record was marginalized. There were a lot of gender bias stereotypes used in the press and the media and by my opponents. And I focused a lot on how do we change the culture, because it's the press, the media, but it's also the voters, and we have to work on that.
You bring up a great point about the media and the perception of what's really going on, right? And it can skew things in a lot of ways. If there's a woman listening to this and she feels like she's met with some resistance, whether she's in a political career or she's in a workforce where it does feel a little more male dominating, what's your best advice to her based on your experience?
What I tell people, number one, read my book. That's one reason I wrote the book, was to help educate people. And a lot of people have said, I do think it's an excellent training book for women who are interested in moving up anywhere, because, it's kind of human nature. Some of the things that happen to me happen in the business world too, happen in other arenas, and not just the political arena. And so I feel like it's useful to them. But I also think, don't give up. That's for sure. Don't ever give up. If you have a dream and you want to achieve something, sometimes you have to regroup, re-strategize. I mean, I'll tell you, there were some times where I was just like, what's going on? Where do I go next? What do I do? Is a door ever going to open? But I never quit. So.
Yeah, you just sound like you were so relentless to pursue what you felt passionate about. And I think that it's just inspiring to hear. So what made you write The Arena, and where did you come up with the title?
Well, what happened was, when I couldn't move up, I'd served 13 years in the state legislature and had been a standing committee there, which I was only, I think, the second woman in the history of the state, a standing committee in the legislature. I had been House Majority Whip. I had passed major child care reform, which had been written up in the New York Times and nationally in Time Magazine. I'd accomplished a lot. And then when I got ready, I ran for mayor and came in second. And then when I tried to move up, running for mayor, and I even had run for district attorney and came in second at one point. And then I thought, well, how do I change the culture? Because, it seems that there's these obstacles here. So that's when I decided to write the book, because I felt maybe that's, insanity is trying to keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. So I said, hey, this time I think I'm going to try a different way. So I wrote a book.
Congratulations on that. I know that I'd love to dive into this book as I'm sitting here listening to you and your story and thinking about it. What do you hope a woman reading your book takes away from it?
And not just women, men too, but I hope that they take away, number one, I do talk about integrity in politics. It's another theme throughout the book, truth and justice, trying to stand for truth, trying to really make it public service and leadership, not self-interest, not what's best for me or just what's best for the people who funded my campaign, but really what is best for the people. So I'm very much talk about that throughout the book. There were a lot of investigations. There were a lot of scandals throughout politics that I talk about in the book. And so I think that's a theme. And then another theme throughout it is, of course, let's get rid of this gender bias. Let's give women a chance. And so that's what I hope people take away, is that women can do these jobs. I'll just tell you, in Tennessee, we've never had a woman mayor of Memphis. We've never had a woman governor. We've never had a woman a constitutional officer in the history of our state. But we were the state that put women's right to vote over the top with the constitutional amendment back in 1920. One guy in the state House of Representatives in Tennessee voted, and we got the right to vote. But yet here we are in 2024, all these years later. Tennessee's never broken that ground, nor nationally have we ever elected a female president of the United States.
All these are so true and so deeply rooted in how the system works and the system operates. So from just your professional perspective, what do you think needs to change? You mentioned the culture and you talked about writing your book to help influence the culture. What do you think it's going to take to start adding women to these positions?
I do think we can train some women better. I mean, I did go through some trainings, and sometimes I had good advisors. When you're moving up in politics, you do need more specialized types of training. We also need funding, because that's where often women have a huge disadvantage. If they're not perceived as being able necessarily to win, then the money goes somewhere else. So that's a huge issue as far as contributing to candidates, good female candidates. Another thing is polling. When people call and ask who you're for, it's very important, if you think there's a qualified female candidate, to answer that poll and say you're for that person and then show up and vote. So I think those are some of the more important things that we need to do to change it. But we're talking about it. The reason I wrote the book is that they call it the glass ceiling. What that means is it's something you can't see. It's a barrier you can't see. My saying is you first have to see it to defeat it. So the more we can talk about it, the more we can demonstrate it does exist, it's real, the better our chances of defeating it and having more and more women serve in these positions.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more that it does take seeing it, right? I mean, just that awareness is so important. And I'm just thankful for you and your voice and also your book for creating more of that awareness. I also can't help but think about women seeing themselves in those positions. Like for you, when I'm talking to you, it sounds like you just had this like very deep belief in your ability to lead and to also lead and advocate for change. Sometimes when I'm speaking to women and what I do, I hear a lot of questioning themselves. Like, am I smart enough? You know, am I good enough? Am I qualified enough? And so what I hear from you is you're really good at advocating for yourself. And it's not in a way that is conceited or with self-interest. It's more of like, if you believe in me, I'm going to work for a bigger purpose. So how do you think we can pour into women that way, like helping them believe in themselves in order to advocate for their own position, whether that's in politics or not?
Well, you know, and some of it has been observed that some of it can be within the educational system, where there's still challenges there. There used to be studies that say the boys would be called on more often than the girls in class to answer questions and things of that sort. And we even had the movie, Barbie come out recently, which is an opportunity to talk about these issues in a very strong way, where a lot of the stereotypes for men and women were in that movie. And I found it fascinating. But yes, even as little girls, we played with Barbie dolls, or now Barbie's evolved some, and there's different kinds of Barbies. And so you kind of get an idea of, well, maybe I could be a lawyer, or maybe I could be the president of the United States. So I think some of those cultural issues are there. But I think for young women and who have an interest in politics or, helping other people, that's one of the things I did. I got involved in other campaigns. I helped other people. And then as far as believing in yourself, I think just maybe talking about it too, because for me, I go back to that anonymous grading. I mean, I guess because I went to law school, they didn't know whose paper they were grading, and I would come out on top. And I'm just like, hey, I know I'm smart enough to do the job. So what's going on here? And maybe they didn't have that experience with law school or something. And so I can see how that would maybe shape a view a little bit differently.
Is anonymous grading specific to law school? I actually haven't heard of this before.
I don't know if all law schools do it, but I know in a lot of the classes I had in law school, it was anonymous. So they didn't know whose paper they were grading. And those tests, we took one test a semester. That was your grade for most classes. So, it was an enormous amount of pressure to do well. But if you came out ahead, you knew that you had the ability to be a great lawyer, or a good lawyer, at least. And I think sometimes that women, they may not realize that, because maybe they're making good grades, but maybe they're not seeing it quite that way in the system. But to me, that made a big difference.
Absolutely. And I think about, a lot of times I do think about like our education system, because I actually work with young athletes and we do elite mental performance. And it's a really hard thing for them to talk about, because they're in this educational structure where they're given a curriculum, they're told how to study, and then they're taking a test. And the test is really how their intelligence is measured. And I don't have a solution for it, but I honestly like the idea of an anonymous test just so that you can eliminate some of those biases. Do you have any other suggestions as far as educational change that might help promote women in particular who feel like they're challenged in learning and stepping up?
There's not as many women leaders as men, so they kind of can only do so much. But I think the more people see someone like them, like, oh, look at that woman. I know when I was running for mayor, I was trying to get some of the women mayors to come to Memphis so that people could see that a woman can be the mayor. But I wasn't able to get them to come. But I think that kind of thing is very important too. And I do think the more we have these women leaders on TV, the more likely that we're going to break more and more of these barriers. But what is unfortunate is that worldwide, women have been leaders of countries hundreds of years. And here we are in the United States. We pride ourselves in a democracy and fairness and equality, but yet we haven't been able to do that yet. So that says something about us. I think talking about it and getting women leaders around and young girls and young women to see them, I think then they'll say, well, if she can do it, I can do it too.
I couldn't agree with you more. In any position where I felt like I've risen to where I wanted to go, especially like a female entrepreneur, I've, like you said, had to go out and find that network. I knew that I needed to be surrounded by like-minded women or women that have been in positions where I want to go in order for me to feel permission to be there. And so I think for anybody listening, if you aspire to be in politics or you aspire to be an entrepreneur or whatever the case may be, and you don't have that network around you, take the responsibility to go find those people and give yourself permission and give yourself evidence that there are women out there that are doing what you want to do. You guys, when I first started my entrepreneurial journey, I had very few examples of women in leadership positions. And sometimes when I shared what I was building with my friends or with my coworkers at the time, they just didn't really get it. Even when I wanted to create some new goals and talk about those ambitions, I didn't feel like I had a community of women to share that with, which is why I found an online community of other multi-passionate, like-minded women. If you can relate, join us in our Rise Facebook community where you get free weekly coaching, a network of amazing women who are also in the arena, and you're the first to know about the latest offers. Women leaders rise together. See you inside our Rise Facebook community. You can find the link in the show notes. So back to your book, Carol. Where did you get the title, The Arena? Because obviously I was so excited when we connected, knowing that the podcast is called The Women in the Arena.
I remember seeing something about your podcast because when I first started researching it from like a copyright perspective, because, when I wrote my book, I worked on it from a lot of different perspectives. I worked on it from a copyright, because I did cite a lot of newspaper articles and a lot of media reports to kind of demonstrate the bias. I looked at it from a defamation angle because I was talking about a lot of people who are still alive and walking and talking, and I didn't want any of them to think that I had said anything defamatory in the book. So I make sure that the book was racially sensitive and that wasn't a reverse gender bias either. So there were a lot of those things I looked at, and that it was 100% accurate, because believe it or not, some of these newspaper articles are not accurate on the facts. And I even went to the court records to look up quotes and things they said, and some of what they said was wrong. So I had to make sure of that. So I was very careful. But actually, I was going to call it something else. And I was very fortunate to have an editor out of New York, Bill Thompson. He published John Grisham's first book before John Grisham was famous. He was an editor, and then he was Stephen King's editor, and he was Stephen King's first editor.
No way.
Yeah, for Carrie.
I know Carrie.
Yeah. So anyway, he was semi-retired in New York, and he did consulting as an editor. So basically, I paid him a lot of money to read my book once and tell me what he thought. So he gave a page and a half of really good points, and I made some revisions. But in the front of the book, I have a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, the Man in the Arena speech.
It's right here.
And you have it. Okay, you have it.
It's right behind me.
I'd given up on the other title. I'd decided it wasn't right. And I said, hey, I think I'll just call it The Woman in the Arena. And he said, Carol, why don't you call it The Arena One Woman Story? Which was so much better because it's not just about my story. All women are in an arena somewhere. And this is just my story that I was hoping might help bring change and help other women too.
That is such a fun backstory, and what good feedback you were able to get. I'm just really pumped about the title itself. So what do you feel like is your most proud part of the book, if you can name one? I know there's probably a lot because there's so much that you have to pour into it, but what is one of the things that makes you most proud about it?
I like the ending because, I thought about it a lot. You don't want to write a negative book or a whiny book. You don't want to write a book that is too egocentric. You don't want to write a book that's boring. Hopefully it's not. It's long, but there's a lot in it. There was a lot to tell. But I like the ending because I talk about the future and I talk about what we can do. Like you say, that the press and the media, hopefully they'll step up and make changes in the way they report. And in fact, one reporter who I do talk about some in the book, we went out to dinner and talked about it. And he said, Carol, I'm really embarrassed that I wrote that one story. And he explained to me, how it came about and kind of apologized for it. And that made me feel good because I thought, well, maybe it did make a difference in his view and perspective.
Yeah, that's really special. Well, before I get into our very last question, which is what I ask every woman on the podcast, what's next for you? I mean, obviously, this is a huge accomplishment, and congratulations for all the work you've done. What's next? What's down the line?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm an elected circuit court judge now, which I got elected a year and a half ago, which is, a huge honor. And I probably have 1,000 or cases that I'm responsible for on the docket. So that keeps me busy. I've thought about writing another book. I haven't made up my mind yet. People ask me if I'm going to run for mayor again or, governor or whatever. At this point, I'm not sure. I wish I had a pat answer, but the main thing I'm trying to do right now is get the word out and let people know that the book is available and hopefully at least have more and more people read it. One of the great things about the book was publishing a book, and it's very hard to write and finish and publish a book because a lot of people never finish the book. But the best thing about it was I would wake up every morning, and I still do, and look online and say, hey, the book's available online in France, and the book's available online in Japan. And it was just so exciting to me to see that somebody anywhere in the world can read this book, and it's for sale there in different venues. And even just this week, I talk in the book about a chapter about, we had a delegation that came to Memphis from Iraq when I was on the Memphis City Council. They were coming here to learn about democracy. They were the pro-democracy leaders in Iraq. And they came here, I think it was like in 2004, and they were wanting to tour City Hall. They came to Memphis, and they got shut out of Memphis City Hall. They actually had the police chief there and said they couldn't come in to City Hall. And I was the only leader who met with them. I went and met with them somewhere else because they couldn't get into City Hall. So anyway, that got written up internationally because it was so embarrassing. And all the leaders in Memphis had to write an apology, but I didn't have to because I was the only one that did the right thing. But one of those leaders just Facebook messaged me this week, and he's like, now I'm a advisor to this interior minister in the country. Well, he had been a mayor, of a city, and now he's this. And I said, hey, I got this book out there talking about when y'all came. And, he's like, great, I want a link, And so, see, to me, that's very exciting because there will be people now in that country who can read this book. And so it may not just be something that impacts change here, but in other parts of the world as well.
That's incredible. Just to like, it's just so hard to know how far your reach spans or how valuable your words are or who they can impact. And I think it's really cool that you're able to see a little bit of that. And there's probably so many more people that have read your book that haven't even said anything, but that it has made a tremendous impact on their lives. How can people who are listening, who are like, okay, I need to get my hands on the Arena One Woman Story now, how can they get your book? What's the easiest way?
Well, it's really easy. You can go on Amazon, of course. It's also available on Walmart. It's available at Barnes & Noble online. And it's available in 3 formats on Amazon, which is the ebook, the Kindle. It's available there on the hardback and the paperback. And then it's available other venues. It's more of the hardback. But it's really, I've marked it down to kind of make it for these podcasts. So if people just do decide to go buy it, this is a good time to do it. It has won some awards, and I'm very proud of that and happy. It won as the best at large autobiography for the National Federation of Press Women. So I really was excited about that. And it did win a regional award from the Independent Book Publishing Entity and other ones. So that's something that also has made me really happy because I wanted the book to be bigger than Memphis. I wanted the book to not just be reviewed here in Memphis. I wanted other people to read it, look at it, and who don't know anybody in the book, including me, and see what they think about it. And so that to me was, that just was wonderful.
That is so cool. Congratulations to you on all your success so far with the book.
And they can also go on to my website, www.carolchumney.com, and it has links on there as well.
And we'll have that information too in the show notes for readers that or listeners that want to go grab it. Okay, Carol, it has been a pleasure. I'm going to ask you the final question that I ask everybody who's on the podcast. But what does it mean to you to be a woman in the arena?
Oh, wow. It has defined my life. We all make these choices in our life. And then you look back years later and you're like, wow, if I had gone in that other direction, what would happen? Where would I be? But of course, you can't go backwards in life. You can only go forwards. But, being a woman in the arena, I learned so much I've grown so much from it. I've met so many wonderful, inspiring, interesting people and still am. And I'm kind of proud of that. And I'm thankful for all the people who helped me. It's definitely maybe one woman's story, but there were a lot of people that helped me along the way, and I'm so appreciative to all of them. And I hope there'll be more, maybe a sequel, maybe there'll be another book where maybe I can add some chapters to this one, and we can talk about some of these glass ceilings being broken, and that maybe one day this will be a book where people will say, oh yeah, I remember back when there never was a woman president of the United States, and then I'll be like, wow, yeah, boy, that was a while back.
Yeah, when you were saying that, I was thinking about the last presidential election. My brother's in the Navy, and he told me he voted for a woman who was running independent. And I just remember thinking like, man, that's going to be the day.
Yeah, it'll be huge. And whoever it is, she's going to have a lot to deal with because it is so hard. I watch the presidential debates each year when they happen, and the women, they have to think about so much more. Like, how do you dress? How do you use your arms when you talk? And can you not do this or that? And it's just these mannerisms you have to work on and sayings. And they have so much more they have to think of because it's rare. And then what really gets to be great is when there's so many women doing these jobs that then all that goes away. And it's really just who's the most qualified.
Yeah, it's the new normal. It's not an outlier. It's the new standard. It's the new normal. And hopefully we see that sooner than later. So thank you absolutely so much for your time. This was a really valuable conversation. I know the listeners are going to enjoy it so much, and I appreciate you for being here.
Well, thank you for what you're doing because you're making a difference in helping to break those barriers too.
I hope today's episode inspired you on your journey in the arena. Make sure to check out the show notes in the description for a rundown of today's show with all the important links. If you enjoyed this, please share with a friend. I know how much it means to me when my friends share podcasts. Leave us a review and let us know it landed with you over on Instagram at Paige_Rene15. As always, your best bet is on yourself.